Hello everyone, welcome back. This is Vinny Crypto from Prosum Solutions, and I'm here to bring you another YouTube video on one of my other famous indicators and strategies called the Quickfingers Luc Space Breaking Indicator and Strategy, specifically the 3Commas edition. So today what I'd like to briefly do is do a quick introduction of the actual indicator, talk about how it came about, walk through the various settings that you will encounter, and also demonstrate for you how you can use it to send signals to 3Commas. So with that, I'll just go ahead and jump into the desktop version of TradingView. So when you acquire a subscription to this particular indicator, you can find it inside your indicators and strategies, specifically in the invite-only scripts section. You'll see the names kind of like this. Some people have been describing that the names are compressed and it's hard to tell them from my other indicator, the general purpose one, and therefore it's hard to read the 3Commas edition at the very end. But if you add it to the chart, you should see 3C at the end here, so it will say QFL 3C for both the indicator, which has the little bell, and the strategy, which has a little chart emoji icon on there. So there are differences between the two. Obviously, the strategy is specifically designed for the strategy tester, and the indicator is specifically designed for sending alerts and signals to 3Commas. So once you get them added to your chart, you can pretty much just jump on into the settings and start backtesting and getting a feel for how the indicator or your bot on 3Commas is really going to perform using the back history. Obviously, past performance is not indicative of future results, but at least it builds up some confidence so you can see how the strategy would function given some past events that have occurred. So what I've done here is I've already added the two indicators. I've actually already pre-configured them for a bot that I was running on 3Commas, which was specifically on PolyUSD, and so on the 5-minute chart. And so what I'd like to do is just kind of use this occasion to really describe the indicators and then also bridge that over to 3Commas so you can see how I configured my bot using the indicator. All right, so with that, we'll go ahead and just jump right into the indicators and strategy settings. So I'll just start with the strategy version first. I'm going to go ahead and minimize. Actually, I'll leave that there. I'll jump into the strategy. So when you first open up the settings, essentially what I've tried to do here is mimic the same layout that you would normally find on 3Commas on the bot settings page. And so the reason this indicator, I went ahead and redesigned the inputs and the way it functioned was because a lot of my customers, excuse me, were trying to use my original QFL indicator as a signal provider to 3Commas, and they were essentially reverse engineering how things were working. They were trying to figure out how the layering was working, how everything was deviated from the base. But with 3Commas, it's a little bit different. You've got the idea of volume scaling and as well as step scaling. So these two features fundamentally is what makes it very different. Therefore, because of this specific manner of defining layers, using the general purpose QFL indicator and strategy required that you had to do a lot of mathematical calculations, either in spreadsheet form or something, in order to get you to translate the settings that you would need for a bot on 3Commas. And so when I started observing all this and trying to do my best in answering questions, I was like, hold on a second, let's take a step back here and see if I can take some of the core elements of my indicator and strategy and really bring that forward and just simply relay out the inputs to match what you normally see on 3Commas, and also just pepper in everything that was essential to make the QFL strategy function within that. So that's how the indicator really came about. And so essentially when you compare the bot setting page on 3Commas, it should roughly look like this. So I've got here a bot that I've been running ever since the end of July. As you can see here, it was created in July 30th. And I just recently stopped it today, as a matter of fact. And so I'm going to be trying a new different configuration here in the next few days. But anyway, I figured this would be a great opportunity for me to show you what I've done and also describe how this indicator works. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to click on Edit on my bot. And what I want to do is really do a side-by-side comparison, because this is essentially how I came about designing it. And so at the very top, you can obviously see the version. This is useful for people that are wanting to upgrade. They're like, okay, what version am I currently on? What version is the current version? And things like that. So I ended up just creating a quick input to kind of capture the version and not include it into the name, because that just kind of makes the name longer. And so I just ended up putting it into an input. So when you look at the main settings section here, you'll notice you've got the name input. So a lot of these inputs are just echoing some of the things that you would see on the bot page, because I was essentially just trying to do a one-for-one where possible, right? Because not everything translates over perfectly from 3Commas to TradingView, and I'll try to highlight those as I hit them. But for the name input, this matches the same name input here. You've got bot type, which is single and multi. So with this one, I only brought over the single because this is a architectural constraint, essentially, that you have with TradingView, is because an indicator is sitting on a chart for a specific symbol, there's really no capability other than using some functions within the language to essentially query out other symbols from other markets and bringing them in. But with the challenges with that are numerous, and I won't go into in too much detail, but for a signaling service, I was trying to do my best to avoid the use of the security function and the possibility of causing an indicator to be repainting frequently. And so I just stuck with the single pair version of this particular bot type setting. There's a chance that a multi-pair feature might make its way in here, but I still need to get more comfortable with how to query other symbols' datas and essentially try to guarantee that it's not going to repaint on you. So this is just kind of a work in progress, but at least it's there, and I only have one option to communicate to you that this is a single pair configuration for the indicator that you're going to be emulating for your bot. Now, obviously, 3Commas has the advantage of having a lot of data concerning your account on the exchange, and one of them happens to be the commissions that you would normally pay when you're buying and selling. And so since that's not really available within TradingView, I do need to ask for that. So I went ahead and brought that over here in this area because it seemed to match really well. Since they bring forward the exchange input, I went ahead and put that in there. So the next section here is the pairs. None of this really is relevant for me to require as an input, because the chart, it pretty much inherits the symbol from the chart. And so obviously, since it's not multi-pair, you won't be adding multiple pairs. So the next section here is the strategy, and that would basically match up to what I've done over here for the strategy section of the settings. You've got long and short. With this latest release of the QFL indicator and strategy, I do now support long and shorts, so you can do that. For the profit currency, this is really not relevant, so I didn't bring this over at all. This is essentially controlling how you want the reporting to be, basically what the units of measure is going to be for when we want to report profits. Now, when it came to the base order size and the safety order size, you'll notice that there are drop downs here. Now, in TradingView, in the Pine script language, I can't dynamically change the labels here to show what is the base currency and which one is the quote currency. And so I didn't have the advantage of trying to replicate these various labels like you see them for the particular symbol that you're on. So because if you switch to a different symbol or a pair here, if you switch to a different pair, these drop downs will change to basically conform to that. So because I can't dynamically change these, I went ahead and just used what they were. So you've got the quote currency, you've got the base currency, and then you've got percent of quote, which is synonymous with percent USD over here. And so once you make that selection, it pretty much defines what are the units of measure for these two inputs, the base order size and the safety order size. And so now the start order type, essentially I've got market and limit, so the indicator will attempt to handle both. I prefer market, although I did code it to handle limit, but I figure since this is a indicator that's going to be sending a signal to 3Commas to essentially start your deal, my preference is to use market because that will pretty much guarantee. When I read the description of what this really does, essentially 3Commas will manage a limit order and keep moving it as the price in the market changes. So I went ahead and decided just to deal with the market for my bot setups, but you do have the option of choosing limit if you want to. So, okay. The next section here is the safety orders section. So that pretty much is similar here to this safety orders section. So you've got pretty much a one-to-one here. So let's see. You've got the max safety trades count. So that matches the max active safety trades count. So this doesn't really do anything in the indicator. I pretty much just brought it over for completeness sake. So that way, if you had multiple renditions of these various bot configurations and you were trying to think to yourself, oh, what did I have set here for this particular bot? Well, you can at least use this as a field to kind of keep track of your settings that you are keeping on the bot on 3Commas. So functionally, this has really no influence onto the script at all. It's just here for your benefit so that you can echo whatever value you had on your bot settings. You got the price deviation to open safety orders from the initial order, so that's there. You got the safety order volume scale and the step scale, and those two match. And so the next section here is the take profit section. Let's see, that would correspond to this take profit section. Now, my QFL indicator, I did bring forward some additional fields that you will not find in the bot settings, and that was specifically because I had a handful of users that were interested in using this feature of changing the take profit percentage as you cross various safety order layers. And so if you do end up using these various inputs, starting with this checkbox right here, you will be required to essentially implement the close deal message, so that way you can send a message to actually close the deal. Because at this point, by using sorry, I keep scrolling up and down. By using these inputs, you will be required to do that because there is no equivalent fields for that in 3Commas. So this is essentially importing a feature that I had in the QFL indicator and bringing that forward, but that will require the use of the closed deal signal for that to function properly. All right, so the inputs pretty much match here. You got take profit. You've got the take profit type of either from the base order or from the total volume. And then you've got trailing. So the unique thing about trailing is that in TradingView, there is a limitation in the broker emulator, which is what is powering the strategy tester, where you can't submit an order in the same bar that you want it to be executed within. So essentially, if I have an order that I submit to the broker emulator, it has to be processed in the subsequent bar. And so because of that limitation, I went ahead and modified the behavior of what the trailing deviation would be like within the indicator. So just be aware that there's a big asterisk on this one. Although I did program it so that it does do some trailing, it won't be a perfect representation to what 3Commas will do. Essentially, 3Commas has the advantage of really tapping into the market data for the exchange, and so they're getting millisecond by millisecond updates, and so they're not constrained in terms of bars or candlesticks or anything like that. And so they have the advantage of truly following the price at the specific deviation that you have here. Whereas because of the limitation of the emulator broker, I have to keep the deviation away from the very low point. If you're doing a long, the very low point of the candle, I have to submit the order saying, okay, you have to be within 1.5% below the lowest price of the bar, and then it'll trail from there. And so just be aware that there's, I do record that distinction on my webpage documentation. And I do describe a little bit about this. So I won't go there now just to make the video short. But just if you want to read more about this input, I highly recommend you go read about that there. Now for the stop loss section, that would correspond to the stop loss. Where is that? Oh, trying to see if I can find it. Why is that not here? Interesting. Well, I think it's because of the paper. I'm actually in a real account, but if you were to look at a bot setting on their paper trading account, you should see a stop loss section just like this. And so I pretty much echoed those same settings here, where the stop loss, as well as how you want to actually process that stop loss. You could either close the deal and move on to the next one, or you can actually stop the bot. So this is useful if you're playing with the configuration and you want to see, when did I hit the stop loss? And so if you choose this option, the indicator will actually stop processing any more deals on the chart itself. So that it will give you the advantage of looking at the strategy tester and checking out, okay, where would I hit my stop at? Now there is this setting within 3Commas called stop loss timeout, and they have various units of measure where you can deal with minutes, seconds, hours, and things like that. Well, I can't bring that over to TradingView. The best I can do is count how many bars have elapsed for a stop loss timeout. So just realize that that's a modification of that setting, but it's close enough that you can at least try to emulate it, especially if you're using lower time frames. This would be useful for you. But if you're in the higher time frames, a stop loss timeout option here wouldn't really do much for you in terms of emulating the performance of your bot. Your bot would obviously have the advantage of using seconds and minutes and hours to try to implement a timeout there. So for the advanced settings, I did echo these very same ones. So don't start the deal if the daily volume is less than, then you provide a value here. So what I've done here is essentially I look at the chart that you're on and look at the resolution and try to calculate how many bars would fulfill a 1 day time period, and then I will aggregate all of the volume data in the chart history, and so that's being brought in. So the higher you go, once you get into the daily time frames, this won't be very useful, because if you choose daily, essentially I'll be looking at the previous bar and getting the volume there and making sure that that's fulfilling your criteria. Otherwise, if you're in the lower time frames, I will just essentially count back until I've accumulated 1 day, and then I'll just aggregate all that volume and test to make sure that it complies with the setting you specify here. Minimum price to open deal, maximum price to open deal, that's pretty much self-explanatory. You provide a price here and it will be tested. Cooldown between deals. This is very similar to the stop loss timeout. I can only implement bars, so that's what I did. So this will just be the number of bars that you want to have elapsed for a cooldown before it jumps in to the next deal. Open deal and stop. This was actually very useful to me when I was developing the script. I would basically enable this and tell it how many deals do I want it to run and then stop. So this just was really helpful for me to troubleshoot and actually look and see how the indicator was performing on the chart. The verify price for limit orders, this is essentially bringing forward a setting that you find in the properties here called verify price for limit orders. If you specify a value here, unfortunately, there's a handful of inputs here that are not readable. My indicator can actually specify the default values, but once you change them, for some reason, PineScript will not allow you to read from it. Now, there are some that you can read from. I believe you can read from the initial capital, you can read from the base currency, and I think that's pretty much it. And so because there is that limitation of not being able to read these in and behave differently as a result, I had to sort of echo them over here. So, and that's actually a very good point that I want to point out. Like this one came up recently in some conversations I had with some users about the order size. Like they were changing these two values, and I recommended to them, don't use these, because in the coding, when I submit orders, I'm just using the settings that you're providing in here. So for the safety order unit size and the order, these particular input values, whatever you put in here is essentially what I'm submitting to the strategy tester. So I highly just recommend don't use these three inputs that are right here. Obviously use the initial capital. The parameting, you can. The indicator, I've coded it to support 100 up to 100 safety orders, and the reason it's 101 is because it's accommodating the base order. So you've got 100 safety orders plus the base order, and that makes it 101. Now for the strategy tester, you definitely want to put in your commission value accordingly, because the strategy tester is actually using this. The only reason I bring forward the commissions for buy and sell here is so I can adjust the take profit price, as well as the average, the break-even price. I also adjust that too, so that you can see it on the chart and actually know where your break-even price is at. And so I use these values because I can't read them. I can't read this input. I basically use these two values to adjust those prices, so that way you're as close as possible to what 3Commas is going to calculate. All right, where did I leave off on advanced settings, I think? All right, so essentially I brought that forward. So if you have that requirement where you want to specify the number of ticks to verify a limit order, you can do that here and enable it. I do have the close deal after timeout, which is emulating this very one right here. And here's the various units of time that it captures, and like the other ones, I'm only interpreting that as the number of bars that you want to have elapsed and then force a close deal. So if you implement this one, you will definitely want to implement the close deal signal, which we will cover when I get to the indicator. Now these here have really no 3Commas equivalents. This is just some chart settings that you can implement to help you visualize what's going on the chart. So for example, here, actually I've got this disabled, but let me go ahead and turn this on so you can see when it starts to load up. This will make for a good visual correlation here. So you can control whether you want to see the safety order lines or not. So for some reason that you've got a very busy chart, or maybe other indicators that are also in play, you want to reduce some noise, you could definitely do that with these various settings here. So you can turn off the lines, and if the only thing you want to see is where they were actually filled, you can do that. You can also turn off the pricing. The pricing option is really relevant on the very last deal, because I do draw various labels here of where the layer prices are at. So in order for me to support 100 safety orders, which I believe is what the maximum is on 3Commas, I use line objects within PineScript. I don't actually use plot lines. And so because I don't use plot signs, you don't have the advantage of seeing the price here on the y-axis. So I ended up printing the prices in a label form, and so that way you can actually see what is the price of these various safety orders. And so if you want to reduce the noise on your chart, you can obviously uncheck this option, and then the pricing disappears. You can also control the fill shapes, so if you want to turn those off, you can definitely do that. And since I've got the strategy loaded, you obviously see the various order executions that are taking place. Now, if you want to change the colors, you can do that. So I'll go ahead and turn these back on. And you can choose something like yellow if you don't like the default color, or you can choose any of these colors in the color palette. So you can definitely do that there. Now, other things that I brought forward. So in 3Commas, you've got this table, the used amount for each step. I did emulate that as well. So once you check this box right here, you'll notice, where did it go? Oh, right. This is something you'll have to be aware of. So I normally have this checked on by default, but I unchecked it earlier. But this is very important. Like if you have this unchecked, just be aware that the tables will not draw until the bar has formed, the very last current bar has formed. And so if I uncheck this, the strategy won't draw the tables because there's a bar that's currently forming. And so it requires that bar to conclude before it really processes the rendering of the tables. And so just be aware that there's just that weird limitation there. And so you would have to check this on every tick in order to see the tables. So, all right, so back to here. So I went ahead and checked the show used amount for each step. So this is essentially drawing prices, I believe, from the very first bar in the chart history, and it's just emulating your setup and showing you the table here. And so let's see, let me get this other one out of the way. Since I've got a split screen going on here, I'm just going to turn off the statistics. And so essentially you'll have a 1-for-1 match. There is some rendering differences, obviously, because in PineScript there is no feature of combining cells together. So some of these cells you'll notice will be a little bit different, but I did bring those over to pretty much match as closely as possible. Other thing, let's talk about the statistics table. This will be the last thing that we talk about in terms of things that you can see. You can control various things like its positioning. So I've had some users say, oh, it would sure be nice if it was on the left side instead of the right side. So you could pretty much control whether it's on the top, middle, or bottom, or whether it's on the right, left, or center. So I pretty much brought forward the entire feature of the table. So this is exactly what PineScript allows you to do to a table. So I brought those all forward. If for some reason this text, because there's so much data in here, I do default to the small setting of the text size for the table. But if something is really hard to read, obviously you can choose normal, and then that will render using the normal font size. And then you would just have to reorient your chart and reduce some of the panel down here at the bottom so that you can read everything. But everything is pretty much there. Now, I think it's highly unlikely that large or huge is going to be an option that you'll want to choose, but it's there in case you want to. I did do some theming. So when I first released this indicator, I did support different colors. I think I started out with like the dark theme, which pretty much emulates the same colors as TradingView. And as well as the light theme. So I'm trying to accommodate here various users that like to use the light theme or they want to use the dark theme. So I didn't want to like hard code the styling of the table to one specific color simply because I like to use the dark theme, but maybe not other users. And so I went ahead and implemented this color theming. And I even use like the Microsoft Blue medium, which you normally find in Excel. And I even have a shout out to the Trading Parrot. They are a YouTube channel I like to follow a lot. And so I even copy their colors on their indicator as well. So if you like to see those colors, you can obviously control that here. And then if you want to specify a custom color, that's pretty much where the rest of the inputs come in, and you can pretty much change how you want the coloring to be if for some reason you've got a specific requirement for it to be a certain color. You can definitely do that here. And so with that, I'll just switch it back to the Microsoft Blue medium, and then we'll just jump right into what you can expect to see in the actual statistics table. So this has been completely redesigned. So if you were to compare this to the original QFL indicator and strategy, you'll notice that it's just a complete redesign. And so some of this I kind of learned through practice. Some of this was observing from other developers on TradingView, how they were gathering statistics. And so essentially what I wanted to do was bring forward some that were very valuable to me in helping me interpret essentially what I can expect based on the chart history, what I can expect from my bot. And so I basically implemented those things. Now, I don't necessarily replicate anything that you normally can gather from the strategy tester, whether it's in the performance summary or in the overview. So I do notice that other script authors will tend to echo some of the metrics that are being gathered here into the table. I didn't find that useful, especially since I'm constrained vertically with space. I just thought to myself, well, if people are really interested in that data, you can definitely jump into the strategy tester and you can look at the various performance summary metrics that are being gathered there, and I'll just leave it at that. And I'll just simply bring new value to the chart by bringing some statistics that you can't find. And so some of the things that I brought forward that I found very useful, because in some Discord servers that I participate in, I notice sometimes people like to take screenshots of their bot settings, or they want to see like a quick summary of the various components of the bot. And so I did notice that 3Commas does that too. In some of their pages, they'll try to condense down to these really small abbreviations. So I brought some of that forward in case users want to take quick screenshots of their table and say, hey, check this out, and they want to share it. They can definitely take a screenshot and then share this with other people, and then that will help people be informed as to the performance of this particular setup for this particular chart and symbol and things like that. So some things you'll see is the name, the summary, the exchange, and the pair. The balance. So the balance is basically a verbatim echoing of the value that you have here in your initial capital. So whatever you type in here will just get reprinted under the balance. The max amount for usage, this is calculated based on the number of safety orders and the deviation and things like that. So this will tell you what is the maximum amount for usage to run this bot. It's basically equivalent to these inputs over here. So whatever 3Commas is doing here, I'm pretty much doing the same thing. So I had to just figure out how they calculated it and brought it forward. So I kept the labels pretty much the same. I did notice in one particular release that 3Commas refined some of their labels, so I did try to get those updated too. So if in the future you do see that maybe some of the labels are not exactly the same as what I had here, I would appreciate if you drop me a note in TradingView or in my Discord server, just so that I can try to stay true to try to keep it as close as possible to the 3Commas page. Now, the QFL stats, this was statistics that I gathered in my original QFL indicator and strategy. So as bases are formed, I keep track of how many. And this also includes the bases that are not participating in the deal. So some of you might be aware of some features. So I won't cover in detail how those function, because if you really want to know how QFL works, I highly recommend you watch my video on the original QFL indicator and how that functions. But there is this concept of where when a base, when you are in a current deal, right, you've got a position on the exchange, the indicator will continue to find additional bases even though you're already trading on a specific base already. It will just keep track of new bases that it's finding, so that when it concludes the deal, it switches to that next to the latest base. And so I pretty much keep count of how many bases were being captured since the trading began. I do capture the mean, median, mode drops, the minimum and the maximum, the standard deviation, and then the amount, as well as the bounce. And so you'll definitely be informed here, like what are you seeing in terms of price movement given the configuration that you defined for the base confirmation settings, which are pretty much here. So these are essentially a watered down version of what's in the QFL indicator. So I echoed them over, and I even renamed some, because now that I'm supporting shorting, it didn't make sense to call this drop and bounce anymore. So if you chose to do the inverse, so if you chose to do shorting, so all of a sudden the label context just kind of changes. So I try to make this a little more sensitive to the strategy direction. And so I try to accommodate sort of the awareness that it could be meaning something different if you're now doing an inverse base. And so you can obviously do a start and stop time frame as well. So if you want to zoom in on a specific range on the chart, you can definitely do that and try to see how it performed there and study the statistics that are being printed in the table. So now, an additional feature that I did bring forward, I did take time and actually figure out, because I've had some users give feedback saying, hey, I appreciate that you're telling me the number of bars, but it sure would be helpful if you can translate that in units of time. And so I took that advice and I was like, all right, I'll see what I can do to figure that out. So essentially what I do here in these labels is when I calculate the number of bars that have elapsed on certain deals, and I keep track of those, I do convert those over into months, weeks, days, hours, minutes, and even seconds. So that way you can see a quick label here. And I'm only printing the units that actually have value. So that way, as you can see here, like in this minimum bars deal, I'm just showing you 1 bar, which is 5 minutes, right? Whereas on some of the higher numbers, I'll actually convert them over into months, weeks, days, hours, minutes, and seconds. And so I also calculate the profit loss per day, the max drawdown. So this is interesting. As I was observing how the strategy tester behaved and how it was reporting drawdown, I mean, I looked at this number and there was a point in time where I was like, really, is it 1.73? And so essentially what I did is I wrote some code to actually keep track of the drawdown relative to the average buy price. So this allowed me to sort of truly see what I would experience, because even when you look at the list of trades, because TradingView's strategy tester is treating every different safety order and base order individually, and it's keeping track of that drawdown separately, it was hard for me to really get much meaning from this, because as you know, we're all aware that these safety orders are participating in a deal. And so you'll have some that are in a loss and then some that are in extreme profit, but together they offset, and then you'll actually experience the profit that you are targeting. And so because of these small little nuances and differences, I decided to just bring forward a max drawdown that is really unlike this one, in which it will actually tell you which deal experienced the maximum drawdown. Now, this will probably be a good opportunity for me to at least talk about too, like the naming of the signals. I went ahead and included the deal number as well as the order name. So that way, when you see something like, oh, max drawdown was in deal 39, you can pretty much start scrolling down until you see D39, which represents the deal 39. So I'll keep scrolling down here until we can see it. So scroll down almost there. There we go. Here we are. So now you can pretty much click on the time, and TradingView will actually take you right to that point in time, and you can actually now observe, okay, how far down in this deal did I go? And you can see here it went all the way down to this level. I'm not sure how many layers we've got here, but essentially you can count them and see how far. And fortunately, it spiked back up and it closed the deal, and then it moved on to the next one. And so, so that was I really appreciated this one. This one I use a lot. I like to look at this and see what is truly going to be my max drawdown within a deal context. Win-loss rate, the number of deals started and completed. And then towards the bottom here, let me adjust my chart so that I can see the full table. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to adjust this to say bottom, and that should allow me to see the bottom half, or the bottom section of this table. All right, so with the safety orders, I do keep track of the mean, median, and mode of how many were filled, as well as the minimum and the maximum, and the total number of safety orders filled. So this will be a unique metrics. This is something that I've noticed that different authors implement statistics in this area differently. Now, this is one that I implemented based on some user feedback. So if there is a need to measure these safety orders in a different way, I guess let me know. Drop me a note, and I'll try to provide an option to essentially allow you to toggle how you want these metrics to sum up. But essentially what it's doing is it's counting how many safety orders were just used. throughout the entire chart history. And then from there, it breaks it down saying, out of the 130, 38 were safety order ones, and then obviously 2, 3, and 4 all the way down. So you can actually see how far down did I go, and you can actually see the distribution of the safety orders and their usage. And that'll help keep you informed as to, do you really need to go that deep, or do you need to go deeper, and things like that based on the configuration you've set up on your bot. So that is the statistics table. I think now that since we've hit all the way down to the bottom on the settings, I think what I'd like to do now is just jump into the alerts and show you what you can expect there. So I'll go ahead and hide that one and turn on the indicator version. And so when you look at the settings here, everything, I'm trying to think if there's any differences. Everything should be pretty much the same except for a couple things. So let's see if I can find those. So because the indicator doesn't have a properties tab here, you'll notice like in the strategy, you have properties where you can define the commission and the initial capital and so forth. Well, the one difference that you'll see in the indicator version is the bringing forward of the initial capital. So this allows me to be able to obtain that value so that I can pretty much provide the same features of the statistics and things like that, so that you could see that summary as well. So otherwise, all the other inputs and the source code behind it are pretty much the same. Except for this new section, because this is the indicator version, I do have this alert section here. Now, essentially what this is there's JSON here that represents the various JSON messages that 3Commas provides you. And so I went ahead and created or echoed that same JSON, but I ended up defining my own placeholders. So if you're familiar with placeholders when you create alerts, essentially I created my own placeholders inside here. As you can see here, I'm trying to bring in one of them called bot ID. So this is one that my code will actually replace this placeholder with whatever value you type in here, and likewise with the email token. Now, I do have another placeholder in here called the symbol, sort of for the pair inside that JSON. And this symbol right here is unlike the symbol that you normally find in PineScript. So if you're familiar with PineScript, you know that it pretty much inherits whatever symbol you see here in the upper left corner is what the value is for the in Pine. But I ended up changing and reformatting that because 3Commas likes to put the quote first, followed by an underscore, and then they put the base currency. And so because they require that format, I went ahead and this placeholder will basically follow that format. Now, if you have a need to not inherit this base currency and the quote currency, you want to basically define a unique one. I think this is helpful for people that are trading like inverse charts, or I think it's like BTC up or BTC down and things like that. If they're using this indicator on chart symbols that are completely different, you can definitely check this little box right here and provide the exact symbol that you want to have placed into that symbol placeholder. You can do that, and so that would be how you would do it. And so that pretty much concludes now the various settings that you will find in the QFL 3C indicator and strategy. So what I like to do now is just really jump into how you would use this to set up connectivity with your bot on 3Commas. All right, so let's go ahead and just jump in on that. So essentially what I've done already is I've pre-filled some of these inputs to contain my bot ID and email token. And I'm not too worried about you seeing this just because my bot's turned off and I don't plan on using this bot anymore. I'm actually going to try to look into some other bots, bot configurations. And so this one I'm pretty much going to burn. So essentially what you do is when you finally get your settings over and you save your bot configuration, you'll notice that you have the ability to go see the details of the bot. Let me see if I can load up mine. I'm trying to remember where that's at. I think it's under DCA bots. Let me just collapse that menu. Okay, here's what. Where did it go? Oh, there it is. Good. That was a little weird. All right, so I'm going to click on the bot that I had going. So this particular page is what I was referring to, and then down here towards the bottom, you have the various messages that 3Commas provides for you. Right? You've got the starting, the deal start signal, which is what we're dealing with here. And then you've got the stop deal. Where is that? This one, where you close. No, not that one. Close all deals at market. Maybe this is the one. Yeah, this is the one. And so these two messages are being handled here. So if you want to start connecting your indicator to 3Commas, essentially what you need to do is grab this bot ID and this email token and then place them in here, which I've already done. And then the next thing to do would be to check this box right here, because essentially what we're now going to do is use this new alert scheme that TradingView has put out for the last few months called the any alert function setting, function call. And so that allows us to create one single alert that can handle multiple messages or events. And so if you want to use the close deal, especially if you're doing any one of these adjusting the take profit inputs, or you have like a close deal on timeout, you'll definitely want to implement that. So you can implement both of these here. And so once those are checked, I'll just go ahead and just deal with one. Once those are checked, you'll go ahead and save that to your indicator. And then you'll come up here. This is how I create an alert. I just like to click on these three buttons here called more, and then just click on the add alert on the QFL 3. And that'll bring up the dialog. And this is the any alert function call. This is a more recent enhancement to TradingView's alert notifications, and so it allows you to create one alert that can handle multiple events. Now, if you do still want to use the traditional alert conditions, I did bring those forward, so I do have backwards compatibility on those, so you can choose that. And then obviously put your JSON here in the body, but you will not have the advantage of using the custom placeholders that I defined, bot ID, email token, and the symbol. So just be aware that the only placeholders that are supported are the ones that TradingView will handle. And you can click on this little question mark icon to see a complete list of all of those there. So I highly recommend just using the any alert function call setting. And so one thing that you'll notice, not everybody has a premium account. Apparently the open-ended checkbox is only available to premium subscribers, and so it's not required to have this checked. A lot of my documentation will show this as being checked, but it's not necessary. It's just simply because it's carrying over from the last time I created an alert, and so it's giving you the impression that it's required to be that way, but in reality it's not. All of these checkboxes, I shouldn't say all, these right here are pretty much just towards your preference, whereas this very last one, the webhook, you're definitely going to need this one. And so once you have this webhook URL in there and you've got the any alert, you can pretty much give your alert name something that you want to call. Let's see. I'm just going to go ahead and change this. I like to change this because in the alert log it can get a little noisy because it's reprinting the contents of the alert name. So I like to just use it differently here. And so I'll just put in here QFL Poly USD demo. All right, so I hit create here, and you'll notice that once I hit create, it will create the alert here. So even though I went through this, this isn't essentially how I would go about doing it. One thing I just realized I forgot to really make mention is about the start time. So when you're preparing yourself to actually integrate, you're going to want to set this start date time to be somewhere close to the real time. And the reason for that is because if you were to leave it at the default, obviously you're going to get all that history in the back in the chart history where the indicator is drawing bases and lines, and you might even find yourself already in a deal, in which case you don't want to be in the middle of a deal and then start it, right? Because you might have to wait a long time. So it would be good to just bring forward that time to somewhere real close. Like in this particular case, you'll notice there's already one existing here. So you could just bring it all the way up to this point, which, let's see, it says November 3rd, 2340. So you'll want to just come in here and say November 3rd, 23. I guess I'll just leave it at, oh, that was weird. There we go. And TradingView introduced an enhancement a few weeks ago where you can now drag that date around with this little, I don't even know what you call this little grip, line grip, where you can actually move the start date. So that's a new feature that TradingView has brought forward. And so my indicator will just adjust accordingly. And so you can just bring it somewhere within view, and then you can fine tune it to the bar that you want it to be on by clicking on it and then grabbing a hold of this little drag handle and then moving it around. So you can bring it all the way up to here if you want. Like if you want to start your bot and say, well, I really don't want to start on an existing base, right? I'm just going to go ahead and wait for a new one to form. Or you can just say, you know what, I'll just choose this one for now. And then the deal signal will fire when the base order price gets crossed. That's when the indicator will actually send the signal to 3Commas. So it's at this point that you would want to create the alert. It's once you set your start date, go ahead and create your alert, and then you're good to go. Now your bot has to be turned on in order for it to be prepared to receive the alert. And as you can see here, these are the messages that my previous alert, the one that I stopped, was sending. And so you can see where it just prints up the message that it sent to 3Commas. And so that in a nutshell is it. I mean, you can even see here. So I do know sometimes people get a little confused, or maybe they're just a little, it's not very clear like how TradingView integrates. We all know that the webhook URL is what's being used. Oops, sorry, that's not where I wanted to go. The webhook URL here is what's causing the connectivity, right? Because once the alert triggers, TradingView will send the message that we've configured in the indicator to 3Commas, and then 3Commas will receive it. So as you're troubleshooting, you'll probably want to use this section of your bot settings page to really see what's happening, whether a message arrived or not. There is a chance that you might have to recreate the alert. This is just something that I've come across just through experience from other Discord servers and just watching other people working with TradingView and integrating to various trading platforms, that there are times where people make mention like just recreate the alert and you'll be good to go. And that actually happened to me once, where an alert fired, but the platform I was integrating with didn't receive it. And so I was a little perplexed by that. And so I ended up deleting my alert, recreating it, and then all of a sudden it started working. So just be aware there are some, I guess, hiccups. I'm not sure what to call them. Just certain breakdowns within the alert infrastructure within TradingView or 3Commas. And so sometimes recreating the alert can help. But if the alert is working, but there's something wrong, you'll definitely want to visit this last events section and see what's going on there. So, all right, I already have reached quite the time length already in this video, so I'll go ahead and conclude that with this. And at this time, I just want to thank you for listening in. If you're still hanging around at this time. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me on my website at prosumsolutions.store, or you can visit me on my Discord server. So I'll bring up my company. Oops, not that one. Oh, this is my profile here on TradingView. But if you want to head over to my store, you can definitely come here and check out what I have to offer. I have included some brand new bundles based on user needs in terms of pairing scripts up together and different durations, and even if you want everything that I've got, that's also available here. So all right, with that, I'll just go ahead and end it, and I look forward to talking with you sometime soon. Take care.